In a quiet village under the dark night sky, families were nestled in their homes, sleeping peacefully. The air was filled with a sense of tranquility for those who had honored their deceased loved ones, having recited prayers, lit candles, and prepared for the masses the next day. They felt a sense of security, convinced that their spiritual duties had been fulfilled. The wealthy families had no qualms about spending their resources, paying for many masses and indulgences, while the poor were left to struggle just to survive. Among the burdened poor was a widow named Sisa, who lay wide awake beside her 2 children, Basilio and Crispin, who were asleep by her side. As she stared into the dark corners of their small bamboo home, her thoughts flickered to the indulgences she ought to purchase for her deceased parents and late husband. "Just 1 peso, she murmured to herself, her brow furrowed in worry. "A peso could mean a week of happiness for my children. It could buy them laughter and joy, or a new dress for Crispin's sister who is growing up." A voice echoed in her mind, the voice of a priest reminding her from the pulpit, "It is necessary that you make sacrifices." The thought of sacrificing her children's joy weighed heavily upon her. "The church does not save souls for free. I must buy these indulgences," she thought bitterly. "But what about my children?" she whispered helplessly, realizing that the church's promises seemed to apply only to those who could afford them. The room around her felt suffocating, and as Sisa watched her children sleep, her heart ached for them. The baby was oblivious to hunger, breathing peacefully in the hammock. But Crispin and Basilio knew the sting of regret that came with empty stomachs. Sisa's thoughts wandered back to the plans she had for them. "They will learn to read and write," she promised herself. "They will have a better life." Yet, deep down, the harsh realities of poverty gnawed at her optimism. Outside her home, cicadas sang their monotonous tunes, merging with the chirps of crickets and the occasional call of a distant animal. The night held a certain magic, but for Sisa, it felt more like a curse. The sorrowful howling of dogs echoed in the streets, sending shivers down her spine. Superstitious villagers believed it signaled the presence of spirits, and although Sisa was not usually one for such beliefs, fear crept into her heart. "Are you there, spirits?" Sisa whispered to the empty room. "If you are, please watch over my children." Her only reply was the rustle of leaves and the occasional call of a nightbird. An hour's walk from the town was Sisa's home, filled with memories of better times and a heartless husband, who had become a stranger due to his gambling addiction. Each time he returned home was a mixture of hope and dread. The sadness in Sisa's heart deepened with the thought of her husband. He would take from her everything she had to satisfy his vices. "He has taken my joy. He has taken my dignity," she thought bitterly. As the clock ticked toward 10, she prepared some rice, hoping to make a special meal for her beloved sons. She had waited all day for this moment, having saved a few precious ingredients from her meager earnings. "I'll make them such a feast tonight," she said softly, glancing at the small pot of boiling rice. 3 tiny fish and fresh tomatoes. They'll love it. She recalled a riddle Crispin had shared with her once, bringing a faint smile to her lips. The black man sat down, and the red man looked at him. A moment passed, and cock-a-doodle-doo rang forth. She chuckled softly to herself. The memory was a brief escape from her worries, but her moment of happiness was short-lived. As she served the meal, the door creaked open, and her husband stumbled in, raucous and reckless. Sisa felt her heart sink. "What have you brought us tonight?" he slurred, eyeing the food. "Nothing much, just a little rice and some fish for the boys," she replied quietly, her eyes downcast. Ignoring her words, he sat down and began to eat voraciously, finishing nearly everything she had prepared. Sisa's heart broke, watching him devour the meal meant for her sons. "You must be hungry," she said weakly, her voice barely a whisper. Finally satisfied, he looked up, his eyes glazed. "Where are the boys?" he asked, almost as if he cared. "They'll be here soon," she replied hopefully, her heart aching for her children. Crispin is coming home later because he knows how to read now. Basilio may bring his earnings from lessons. At the mention of money, her husband paused, considering whether to linger or leave. In that case, he muttered dismissively, keep a peso for me. And with that, he left again, fading into the night, leaving Sisa with her sorrow. Once alone, Sisa wiped her tears and prepared the last of the meal. They'll have good appetites, she thought, trying to stay positive in the darkness. I can sacrifice my food for my boys. She carefully set aside 3 fish, determined to keep them warm. Time seemed to crawl, and Sisa strained to hear the familiar sounds of her children approaching. Basilio, Crispin, she called softly into the night. The only response was the rustling of palm fronds swaying in the wind. Panic crept in as her imagination spiraled. What if they didn't come back? What if something had happened to them? Suddenly, a black dog appeared at the edge of their yard, dragging something along the path. Fear gripped her heart as she grabbed a stone and hurled it at the creature, causing it to scurry away with a mournful howl. She was not superstitious, but tales of bad omens clouded her mind. Oh God, please protect my boys, she prayed fervently, her heart racing. Just then, she thought she saw a shadowy figure by the fire, and her heart leaped. Crispin, she gasped, hope infused with fear. But as she blinked, the illusion vanished. Is that you? She whispered into the darkness. Mother, open the door, came Basilio's voice from outside. Relief washed over her as she rushed to the door, flinging it open. Basilio! Crispin! Her heart soared as she hugged her sons tightly, feeling their warm bodies in her embrace. The darkness felt a little less heavy now. Did you miss us, Mother? Crispin asked, his face lighting up with a smile. Oh, my boys, you have no idea how much, Sisa replied, her voice trembling with joy. Sit down, your meal is waiting. As they shared the simple feast, Sisa's heart felt full again. If only for that moment, momentarily pushing the weight of her troubles aside. For a mother, nothing compared to the joy of being with her children, even amidst life's hardships. Together, they sat in the flickering firelight, laughing and sharing stories, while the night outside slowly gave way to dawn.